This is the true story of a painting that survived the flames when nothing else did. Imagine Britain in the 1980s. Post-war homes across England were being filled with cheap, mass-produced decor. It was a time of floral patterns and functional furniture. And one particular image started appearing everywhere. You'd see it in markets, furniture stores, even as a promotion in the local newspaper. It was a portrait of a young boy, his face full of sorrow, with big, tear-filled eyes. He was just known as the crying boy. The painting was harmless, forgettable even. Just another ordinary piece of art you'd barely notice on a wall. But soon, it would become impossible to ignore. It started in northern England with a series of routine house fires. Firefighters would arrive to find entire homes gutted, the interiors reduced to ash and rubble. It was a tragic but familiar scene. But as they sifted through the wreckage, they started finding something strange. Amidst the blackened ruins of family homes, one object was repeatedly found untouched. It was always the same painting, the crying boy. While everything else had been consumed by the inferno, the portrait of the weeping child would be lying there, perfectly preserved. At first, it was just a strange anomaly, a fluke. But then, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Fire crews from different counties, working completely independently, started reporting the exact same detail. They described scenes of total devastation: burned walls, melted furniture, ceilings collapsed to the floor. And there, in the middle of it all, the painting would be intact. The canvas was never scorched. The glass in the frame was never cracked. Sometimes it would be found on the floor, face up. Other times, it was reportedly still hanging on a charred wall. There was no clear explanation. How could a cheap paper print survive temperatures hot enough to melt metal? The stories began to circulate among the fire stations. Veteran firefighters, men who had seen everything, started talking about it in hushed tones. Some of them even refused to have the painting in their own homes. The anecdotal evidence was piling up. It felt like every house that burned down had one of these prints on the wall. Whispers started to spread through the stations, then out into the public. Was this all just a bizarre coincidence? Or was something far more sinister at play? Was it a curse? In 1985, the story exploded. The British tabloids got a hold of it and splashed sensational headlines across their front pages. The curse of the crying boy. Suddenly, it wasn't just a firefighter's tale anymore. It was a national phenomenon. Families from all over the country began coming forward with their own unsettling stories. They spoke of cold spots that would suddenly appear in the rooms where the painting was hung. Many reported a constant unnerving feeling of being watched by the tearful eyes in the portrait. Most terrifying of all were the accounts of fires starting suddenly, often in the middle of the night, with no logical cause. A common thread in every story was the painting, hanging silently on the wall, a witness to the looming disaster. With the media frenzy, the legend of the boy himself began to grow. All sorts of rumors circulated about the subject of the portrait. One story claimed the boy was an orphan whose parents had died in a terrible fire. Another suggested the artist specialized in painting cursed children, capturing their sorrow and bad luck on canvas. The most popular and chilling theory was that the boy in the painting had himself died in a fire, and his vengeful spirit was now attached to every copy of his image. The painting was no longer just a piece of art. It became a symbol of unresolved grief, and perhaps of vengeance. The boy's tears were no longer seen as just sadness, but as a warning of the fire that would follow. Panic set in. People who owned the prints became desperate to get rid of them. Families threw their paintings into bonfires, trying to destroy the curse with fire itself. But this led to even more disturbing claims. Some people swore that the paintings refused to burn, that they could pull the print out of the flames completely unharmed. Others reported that fires would mysteriously start in their homes almost immediately after they tried to dispose of the painting. The fear was contagious. What do you do with an object that seems to bring destruction, but can't be destroyed itself? The paranoia reached a fever pitch. Newspapers, the very same ones that had sensationalized the curse, decided to take matters into their own hands. They organized mass public burnings. In a scene that felt like something out of a historical witch trial, hundreds of crying boy prints were collected and thrown into enormous bonfires, often supervised by the local fire brigade. People watched as the images of the sad-eyed child curled and turned to ash. They hoped that by destroying the prints en masse, the curse would finally be broken. For a while, it seemed to work. The fires stopped. The stories faded. Of course, the experts and skeptics had their own theories. They offered perfectly logical explanations for why the paintings survived. The most common one was that the prints were treated with a fire-retardant varnish. As mass-produced items, it was plausible they all had a protective coating that made them more resistant to flames than other household objects. Another theory suggested it was about simple physics. When a hook or string holding the painting burned through, the frame would fall off the wall, landing face down on the floor. This would protect the paper print from direct heat and falling embers. These explanations were logical, rational. But for those who had lost everything, they weren't very comforting. And then there were the stories that didn't fit these neat explanations. The reports from firefighters who found the painting still hanging on what was left of the wall, untouched, even as the surrounding area was a blackened mess. What about the homes that supposedly burned down again, right after the owner brought the painting back inside? Science could explain a print falling face down, but it couldn't explain the feeling of being watched, the sudden cold spots, or the overwhelming sense of dread that so many owners reported. The fear lingered, long after the embers cooled. Eventually, the phenomenon died down. Production of the crying boy prints quietly stopped. Shops and market stalls refused to sell them. The image that was once a staple of British homes slowly faded from public life, replaced by new trends and new decor. The curse, it seemed, had run its course. But the stories remained, passed down as a bizarre and unsettling piece of modern folklore. Even today, the legend hasn't completely disappeared. Original prints from the 70s and 80s still surface from time to time, in charity shops, flea markets, and online auctions. The people who buy them, often collectors of oddities, frequently report the same things: a pervasive feeling of unease, the sense of being watched, and a general air of sadness that seems to hang around the painting. While there have been no major fires linked to the prints in recent years, few people seem to keep them for long. Many who encounter them refuse to even touch them, aware of the dark history they carry. So what was the truth? Was it a curse, the vengeful spirit of a lost child trapped in a million identical prints? Or was it just a case of mass hysteria, fueled by coincidence and amplified by the media? A perfect storm of fire-retardant varnish, cheap manufacturing, and human psychology? Science offers logical explanations. The witnesses offer their fear. And the firefighters who were there, who saw it time and time again, largely offer their silence. The truth remains unresolved, lost somewhere in the smoke and ashes of countless burned-out homes. It leaves you with one final, unsettling question. When the flames came for everything, why did they always spare the child who was already crying? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more dives into the unexplained.